Hello and welcome. Today we are going to be covering Chapter 3. Specifically, I am going to cover the EFE and CPM matrices. These are in your book and you'll be required to do them for your homework and for your threaded discussion. So I'm going to go over them up on the chalkboard behind me. If you can't read what I'm writing on the chalkboard, don't worry about it. I'm going to embed the Excel file or PowerPoint file or some sort of file into the video so you'll be able to see exactly what I do. And I'm going to use the same numbers up on the chalkboard that I'll embed in the video. So you'll be able to download that or pause the video at that point and you'll have no problem reading it, just in case you can't read my writing. I'm going to go through exactly how these matrices are done, and hopefully you'll have no problems doing it on your own. And if you do, please contact me. It's real important. If you find yourself spending a lot of time on these, you're probably doing it wrong. They're not too difficult, and if you get, sometimes students make them a little bit more difficult than they are. And so if it takes you any longer than it's taking me, please don't hesitate to give me a call or shoot me an email, and I'll help you work through it. All right, we're going to start off with the EFE analysis. All right, before I go any further, please open your books to the section that covers the EFE, and that way you'll be seeing what I'm doing and you'll understand where I'm going with this. In the far left column, we have opportunities and threats, and you probably recognize those from traditional SWOT analyses. This is the O and T of a SWOT. So we start with opportunities and threats. And you have to pick your company. I believe for your homework assignment you're doing McDonald's, if I remember correctly. I'm going to pick a different one. I'm going to pick Ford. So we're going to do an EFE for Ford Motor Company. So first we need to come up with opportunities, then we'll come up with threats. The thing with the opportunities and threats, we're looking for about 5 minimum of each. These are the two most difficult categories. When we go to strengths and weaknesses, which we'll do next week when we do the IFE analysis, the strengths and weaknesses, it's easy to come up with a list of 10 for each. Opportunities and threats are a little tougher, so I want you to stretch and try and come up with at least 5. So for opportunities for Ford, we're going to start with fuel economy. I'm going to abbreviate a little here. Like I said, all this will be available. I'll have this on another slide embedded. Low emissions is another opportunity. If they can come up with a car that's gets great fuel economy, that's a good thing. That's an opportunity. A car with low emissions is a good opportunity. Another opportunity is there's weak domestic competition. Okay. GM is very weak right now. They're being subsidized by the government. Dodge is very weak and being subsidized by the government. Has been recently bought out. So they can definitely take advantage of that situation. Next, low interest rates. This is a great opportunity. With interest rates this low, they can finance cars easier, which means they can sell them easier. Finally, alternative fuel. Whether this be hydrogen, electric, ethanol, milk, seawater, grass, dirt, whatever it might be, any type of alternative fuel is great, and you can see where a lot of these are related, and that's okay. Threats. Big threat is always the competitors. Now, if you get desperate and you don't have enough threats, you can start naming them by name. Put them by name. Like you put GM, Nissan, Toyota, and so forth. We're not going to do that here. Next, fuel price. Okay, that's a big threat, the increasing fuel prices. Emission standards. And one day they are going to make chalkboards for tall people. Emission standards. Finally, the economy is also a threat. Poor economy means poor auto sales, so that's obviously a threat. And inflation is the last one. Inflation is always a big threat, because with inflation comes increased prices of fuel, food, everything, and you have less money to spend on a new car. Right, so we've got 5 of each. We could have done 8 of each. We chose 5. We put a line here to divide what we're going to do next. The next column is weight. Okay. We are going to weight each item based on its level of importance. We're going to weight all of the weights for all 10 items have to equal 1.0. 1.0. So we know where we're headed. And now we have to divide that 1.0 over these 10 items. Of course, you could just put 0.1 for everything since we have 10, but we want to do it right and weight how important each one of these things is. And so, so for fuel economy, I'm going to give that about a 0.15. It's important, but it's not, it's an ugly 5. Let's do it so we can read it. Okay. Low emissions. Let's give that one a 0.1. I like to use multiples of 5, or either 0.05, 0.15, 0.25, 0.1, 0.2. Makes it a little easier to come together. You don't need to do that, though. You can go 0.0325, and as long as it all equals 1, it doesn't matter. Weak domestic competition, that's a 0.1. Low interest rates, that's a 0.05. Alternative fuel, put 0.05 there. Competitors, let's put 0.2. That's always the most important, because if you don't address this, everything else is moot. They're just going to beat you and run you out of business. Fuel prices, let's go 0.15. That is a huge threat. That's a big deal, so that's a higher number. Emission standards, let's go 0.05. They always find a way around those. Economy, 0.05. It's important, but there's always ups and downs. Inflation, 0.1. And if you total all those up, they come to 1.0. Now, one thing that you realize I kind of did that a little bit fast. Well, one, I'd done it ahead of time and written it down so I didn't stumble over it too much and could keep the video going. But also, it's not absolutely vitally important you get it right, because the bottom line is we just don't know what the real percentages is. This is your opinion. Okay? Your opinion counts. This is all your opinion, and it's going to work out in the end. So I want to stress that I didn't pull these numbers from anywhere. I don't have a source. I didn't do research. You may need to do a little research if you don't know your company at all, but even from the case, you could probably pull enough to make these calls and to make these decisions. Once again, it's your opinion as to what the opportunities and threats are, and it's your opinion as to how to weight them. And it's also going to be your opinion as to how to rate them. All right, the rating is the next column. The rating is a score from 1 to 4. Not 0 to 4, 1 to 4. And you're going to rate based on how well the company, Ford, is responding to each opportunity and threat. Okay? So how the quality of the response of the company to this opportunity and this threat is how you're going to rate it. Don't pay attention to the weight when you're doing the rating. So we're going to give them, how is Ford responding to the need for a better fuel economy? We're going to give them a 2. Their cars don't get real good mileage right now. Not what they're going to do, what you think they might do, what they're doing now. Low emissions, we'll give them a 3. They're working on that. Once again, these are my opinions. You may disagree with me, and if you did Ford, you'd probably have different numbers, and that's okay. Put the numbers that you think are right. Weak domestic competition, we're going to give them a 4. They're jumping all over this. Remember, Ford is the only solvent American car company. The others failed and were bailed out by the government. So they're definitely taking advantage of this. And they've been really profiting ever since the government took over the other two or bailed out the other two, because the consumers are flocking to them for that very reason in many cases. And also for the reasons they were successful ahead of time, and many people believe they make a slightly better product. Once again, you may not agree or disagree, but they're successful, so we'll give them a 4. Low interest rates. They're taking advantage. They have incredible programs right now. I'm not advertising for Ford, by the way. This is just something we can all understand. Alternative fuel, they're not doing much there, or haven't done much yet, so we'll give them a 2. For competitors, we're going to give them a 4 of how they're addressing their competition. They're beating their competition very well right now. Fuel prices. This is a big threat. How are they responding? Not so well so far. Give them a 2. Emission standards. Emission standards are going down, and Ford is struggling with that, so we'll give them a 2 there. Economy. How are they addressing our current economic situation. They're actually doing very well because they're still making money despite the bad economy. So we'll give them a 4. And inflation, we're starting to creep into inflation right now. How are they handling it? Their sales are still good, so they're doing pretty well. 4. Well, next column, weighted score. Weighted score. So we're going to multiply column A times column B. Okay, so we got 0.3, 0.3, 0.4, 0.2, 0.1, 0.8, 0.3, 0.1, 0.2, and for the final column, where 0.1 times 4 is 0.4, total all this up, we get 3.1. Okay? This is your score. This is the reason we do this, is to get the score 3.1. And one thing I've found in 10, 11 years of teaching this book and this material now is that if I tell 20 students to do Ford, they will come up with different opportunities, different threats, different weights, different ratings, different weighted scores, but this will always be about the same. That's why I love this method, that's why it's effective. I've done this in the classroom countless times. I give them a company, I say do it. I don't care what all this is, tell me your score, and they'll all be within, if I do Ford, it's usually be between 2.9 and 3.3. Very consistent. And so it's a very accurate method, and all of this math takes into account all the variability in opinion, and we usually spit out a very similar score. So that's how you do the EFE. Now I'm going to jump right into the CPM because the CPM, Competitive Profile Matrix, builds off of the EFE. And we can actually do the the CPM as a build out from the EFE. And it's a pretty quick addition. So we'll get through this rather quickly. This is the key though. You're going to have to do this EFE repeatedly in this class. And so knowing how to do it, it shouldn't take you any longer than I just did it. It'll actually be quicker because you won't be talking and pointing and explaining as you do it. It's a pretty straightforward exercise. Like I said before, if you get stuck and you find yourself going slow or struggling with any of the math, let me know. Let me know right away. Okay, I'm going to skinny up this column here, this weighted score. I'm going to put a WS because we need the space. All right? So this is all Ford. Well, now we're going to pick 2 competitors. We're going to pick GM, and then down here under this screen, we're going to pick Nissan. Okay, because the idea behind the EFE is to figure out how well each company, Ford in this case, is addressing the external factors. They're doing a score of 3.1. Anything above a 3 is pretty good. Now we're going to figure out how well GM does and how well Nissan does. The beauty is we don't have to go back and do opportunities and threats again. That's defined for the whole industry. So that's already done. All we have to do, we don't even have to do the weight again because it would be the same. So we just have to do the rating and the weighted score for each of these 2 to finish our CPM. And we'll see which of these 3 companies is most effective in dealing with their external variables, the external factors. So for GM, all we need to do is our rating. So how well GM is handling each of those things, and then we'll do a weighted score. All right, so for the rating, how well does GM handle fuel economy? Well, they've got the Volt coming out, so that gives them a big leg up, so we'll give them a 3. And as far as low emissions, they're doing a lot there, so we'll give them a 3 as well. Weak domestic competition. Well, they are the weak domestic competition, so we'll give them a 1. Low interest rates. They have great deals right now as well. All the companies are taking advantage of that. They get a 4. And alternative fuel. We'll give them a 3. They're exploring a lot of options, and they're one of the leaders with hydrogen fuel, and have actually a few hydrogen fuel cars out there, I believe, even though they're not in mass production. All right, next, the threats, competitors. Well, they're really struggling next to Ford and their other competitors. They're not selling that many cars compared to what they used to. We'll give them a 1. Fuel prices. How are they handling fuel prices? Well, they do have the more fuel-efficient car line. They have several different hybrid models. We'll give them a 3. Emission standards. Well, everyone struggles with those, too. Economy. How are they doing with the economy? Very poorly. They went out of business. So obviously 4. We can't give them a 4. We'll give them a 1. And then lastly, inflation. How are they doing with inflation? They're struggling a little bit. It's hurt them a bit. We'll give them a 2 to be on the nice side. So then we multiply these over, and we get, so we're multiplying here this column times this column. Weight, the original weight, times the rating. That's where a lot of students get tripped up because they re-weight everything. We do the original weight times the rating, and we go 0.45, 0.3, 0.1, 0.2, 0.15, 0.2, 0.45, 0.1, 0.05, and 0.1. Nope, that's 0.2. 0.1 times 2, yeah, 0.2. And that should give us a total of 2.2. All right, so 2.2 is a low score. And that makes sense. GM is a company that's essentially gone out of business, and it's still going because the government gave money. If the government wasn't there, it would have gone out of business. And that's what you would expect with a score of 2.2. So you could say, anecdotally, that's pretty accurate. And compared to Ford, Ford is 3.1. Ford's doing well. That makes sense. So now let's go over to Nissan. Nissan's a little bit of a different animal, and they're not a domestic car company, but they do a lot of their business here. So it's going to be a little tricky at times, but we just do what we did with GM. We'll go rating and weighted score. So for rating for Nissan, let's go with fuel economy. They've got the Nissan Leaf coming out, which is 99 miles per gallon. I mean, you don't use fuel. And they've got other very fuel-efficient cars, so we're going to give them a 4. Let's go for low emissions. Let's give them a 3. Their cars do very well. For weak domestic competition, are they taking advantage of the GM, Dodge, Ford situation? They're doing pretty well, so we'll give them a 3 there. How are they doing with low interest rates? They have great programs like everyone else. That's a 4. And with alternative fuel, they're exploring, and they've got the Leaf. They're exploring other options. We'll give them a 3. These might be a little generous. You might disagree with these, but for the sake of the exercise, we'll just go with it. Nissan, in terms of their threats, we got competitors. They're doing well in association with their competitors. They're taking advantage of their competitors' weaknesses. We'll give them a 3. Fuel prices, how are they handling that? They're doing everything they can to compensate for the high fuel prices. Emission standards, they struggle like everybody else. Economy, how are they accounting for the economy? Well, they're doing very well as a company right now. Well, at least well as can be expected. We'll give them a 3. And for inflation, they're also, once again, their heads are above water, so we'll give them a 3 there. So now we multiply it over, and then we'll total it up and see where we go. So we go 0.6, 0.3, 0.3, 0.2, 0.15, and then we go 0.6, 0.6, 0.1, 0.15, and the last one is 0.3. So to total this column, we end up with 3.3. And so you see that Nissan's a little bit higher than Ford and a lot higher than GM. Most people, if they do these on their own, if I hand this to the entire class, maybe the differences won't be as much, but this is usually how it turns out. You have Nissan a little bit ahead of Ford and quite a bit ahead of GM. On occasion, you might see Ford and Nissan reversed with some students, but by and large, this is how it turns out. But you're not going to be doing this on cars, and you may disagree with what I did. You're going to be doing it on McDonald's. You're going to be doing comparing McDonald's to other restaurants of the kind. You can pick whichever restaurants you'd like to do the CPM. I would recommend other fast food restaurants as similar to McDonald's as possible, because that's the idea, to get the most similar competition as possible. So you're probably looking at a Burger King and a Wendy's or something like that. You don't have to do those two. You can pick any fast food you'd like, but those are the two that pop into my mind. But maybe in your particular area where you live, there might be other restaurants that are a little bit more apropos for that. Well, once again, if you have any questions on any of this, either the CPM or the EFE, please contact me right away. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next chapter.